So I will ask Representative Dahm if you'd like to get us started.
Sure. Just want to make sure my volume is on. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Representative Mindy Dahm, and I represent the 3rd Hampshire District in Massachusetts, which includes Amherst, Pelham, and half of Granby. I also serve as the acting chair of the ENWIC committee, and I'm grateful to my colleagues and to their staff for attending today's presentation. Thank you all for your commitment to toxic use reduction in your districts and statewide. UMass Lowell TURI has some incredible community champions to recognize today, and I'm excited to hear their stories. The TURI grant program has supported community organizations and their local projects to reduce toxins in our day-to-day lives at home, at work, and in schools. Equally important, all the projects you'll hear about today engage directly with constituents and residents to inform and educate them on personal and environmental toxic risks and empowered them to make safer decisions when it comes to personal care products, household products, sanitation products, and resources as vital as water. I appreciate the commitment my colleagues have demonstrated in the budget and through efforts like the PFAS task force led by Rep. Hogan to learn and understand everything we can about PFAS and other harmful chemicals, and to identify the actions we can take at the state level to protect our constituents, our friends, our neighborhoods, our communities, our environment, and our natural resources from toxins. But those community organizations, with the help of TURI, are doing the critical work of translating scientific concerns from highly technical language to easy to understand language so that all of us, Massachusetts residents, including legislators, not academics or only scientists, can understand the risks and the alternatives and take action. I am so pleased to be recognizing and celebrating the work of these organizations today with UMass Lowell TURI, and I'd like to turn it over to the staff at TURI to introduce our community champions. And thank you so much for including us today.
Thank you so very much for that lovely introduction. We really appreciate it very much. My name is Rachel Massey, and I'm from the Toxic Use Reduction Institute. And I will now share my screen and get us started here. Just one moment. So we are presenting the Community Champions of Toxic Use Reduction today. And I just want to say before we get started, I have been so incredibly impressed with the work that these community leaders have done this year. They have all received a grant from TURI, but the work that they have done has gone far beyond what we envisioned in these grants. And as you hear them summarize their work, just be aware that they have put really lots of organizational resources and huge amounts of volunteer time into these really successful projects. So I'm really honored to have been able to work with these groups. For anybody who's new to the State House and not already familiar with us, the Toxic Use Reduction Institute, or TURI, is one of the implementing entities of the Toxic Use Reduction Act. We work in partnership with Mass DEP and with the Office of Technical Assistance and Technology, or OTA, and we all have a mandate together to work with Massachusetts businesses and communities to reduce the use of toxic chemicals. The groups that you'll be hearing from today are working in a number of areas, and I'll just briefly list them. They have worked on PFAS in firefighters' gear, chemicals in personal care and household products that are marketed to Black women, PFAS in water and everyday products, and safer cleaning and disinfection. And what all of these projects have in common is they're all working to educate people about toxic chemicals and their effects on health and the environment, and then to offer, implement, and test safer alternatives. So these are very hands-on, practical projects that are directly helping people to protect their health and the environment. If we were doing this in person, we would all, just get to have everybody come up to the front of the room and be congratulated together. in the absence of that, I just wanted you to have a snapshot of all the wonderful people you will be hearing from today. So really fantastic group. And before we get into the details of the project, I just also want to share with you that that there have been a number of other projects this year that have been also supported by TURI grants. Let's see. We've been asked for live transcription, so I'm going to enable that. So the other grants that have been in progress this year have been on topics including metal finishing, cleaning for metal parts, auto repair, dry cleaning, pharmaceuticals, and electronics processing. And again, these are all projects related to toxic chemicals and adopting safer alternatives. And the last thing that I want to mention before we get into the project is that the upcoming grant cycle has now launched, and we're accepting applications for industry grants, small business grants, and community grants. The applications are due July 22nd, and we would love to have you share this information with your constituents. And as always, people should feel free to reach out to us with any questions about the grants. We're always happy to discuss them. So with that, I will stop sharing. And Courtney, I'll invite you to share your screen and start presenting the work of the Nantucket PFAS Action Group.
Great. Hi, thank you. And I apologize, I have a little bit of a cold. Thank you to the Joint Committee on Environment, Natural Resources, and Agriculture for hosting this legislative briefing and recognition event. We appreciate you inviting Nantucket PFAS Action Group to share our story. My name is Aisha Khan, and I'm joining you here today from Nantucket. In late of 2019, next slide. Next slide. There we go. In late 2019, my husband, Nate Barber, a 38-year-old father of 2 young boys and captain of the Nantucket Fire Department, was diagnosed with testicular cancer that is linked to PFAS exposure in the fire service. This was the first time that we had ever heard of PFAS and where our journey began. We found that PFAS were in Class B aqueous film forming foams, also referred to as AFFF, as well as in the firefighting gear. Next slide. According to the International Association of Firefighters, cancer caused 66% of career firefighter line of duty deaths from 2002 to 2019. We had no idea that Nate was just one more diagnosis in an alarming countrywide trend. Yet we are the lucky ones because my husband is still alive, and therefore we can speak up for those who no longer can. Firefighters eat, sleep, work, and exercise in a house that is saturated in PFAS dust. Forever chemicals are on every surface they touch. At no point were firefighters given any guidance on managing, handling, replacing, let alone the health issues associated with AFFF or their gear. There were no warning labels. If anything, many like Nate were actually told AFFF is just like soap. It's safe. This is why we so greatly appreciate all the hard work that Massachusetts put into learning about PFAS and with its multi-sectoral approach through the PFAS Interagency Task Force. Our community grant with TURI has opened doors and started the conversation about how we can help our firefighters reduce their occupational exposures. We were also very lucky enough to partner with Dr. Kerrigan, who will now share her expertise on this multifaceted and complicated topic.
Thank you, Aisha. Hey, everybody. So like Aisha said, my name is Courtney Kerrigan. I'm an assistant professor at Michigan State University. I'm an exposure scientist and environmental epidemiologist. I trained at Boston University and Harvard. I'm really honored to be a part of this amazing group. And I have a little bit of a lag in my slides. So sometimes I click it and it doesn't go. Okay. So like Aisha said, cancer incidence and mortality are elevated in firefighters, and this includes cancers linked to exposures that are elevated in the fire service, including PAHs, diesel fumes, and PFASs. We know that exposure to multiple carcinogens can increase risk. So for example, smoking plus asbestos exposure can double the odds for lung cancer. And there's a lot of interventions now to reduce firefighter exposure to carcinogens, including interventions for smoke and soot, diesel fumes, and PFASs and AFFF that include transitioning to fluorine-free foams. And Nantucket, I believe, is the first in Massachusetts to do so. We now know that PFASs can be in turnout gear, or have been in turnout gear. And that gear made over a decade ago contained high levels of PFASs that easily shed off onto the skin and the environment. This Harvard study found elevated levels in the dust, both in the turnout gear as well as in the dust of the fire station. A study that I was involved with Jennifer Field's group was able to actually measure PFASs in different layers of the turnout gear and found high levels of non-volatile PFASs in the outer layer and the moisture barrier. And also found that some of these newer gear, as well as some of the older gear, contained PTFE, so a fluoropolymer film in the moisture barrier. And using methanol extraction, found that PFASs actually would come off of that moisture barrier, that fluoropolymer layer. And so we think this represents what would come off from the gear over its lifetime. We look at levels of PFASs, of elevated PFASs in different studies of firefighters. You can see different PFASs were elevated, but the point of the slide here is that all the way to the right, you can see all the different PFASs that we found in gear, and these are all PFASs that were also elevated in firefighters, as well as were found in textile factory. So good indication that we have some concern here with firefighters. Both in terms of incidental dust ingestion as well as potential for dermal absorption. However, we need more information to understand how much exposure occurs and what it means. Firefighters are especially interested to know how useful it is to switch to new generation gear such as PF0, which has no PFASs in the outer or thermal layer, but does have this fluoropolymer in the moisture barrier. And so that's what our study is doing. And I just want to note that funding for these types of studies, it's really difficult to come by. This is a really niche type of study, and the TURI grant program is really wonderful for allowing this type of community-driven work to provide key information for protecting firefighter health and safety. It's also important to note, and sort of in the big picture, that regardless of what we find with firefighter exposure, fluoropolymers can still pose a problem because PFASs are used and released in their production. And when they're released from the environment, they can enter the water and also enter our drinking water. And we know that the EPA just issued last week a new health advisory for PFOA and PFOS that is extremely low. Many PFASs have been shown to act on multiple systems of the body, not only cancers like kidney and testicular, but also high cholesterol, immune disruption, decreased fertility, and problems with development. We expect that some PFASs will be released from the gear throughout its lifespan, including venting outside where it can dry deposition onto the ground and enter drinking water, as well as when you wash the gear, likely it's released, the PFASs are released into the wastewater treatment plant, which can't really deal with PFASs, so then you get PFASs coming out into surface water, which can then be used for drinking water, can be in a fishery. Also, it ends up in the biosolids or the sludge, which can be land applied. And we know that newer PFASs are taken up more easily into plants and crops. So all that to say that moving away from PFASs, including fluoropolymers, is a smart and sustainable choice to protect everyone from this harmful class of chemicals. So these are some pictures from the exposure study we did. I was able to visit Nantucket this March. Aisha organized this really amazing event. A lot of firefighters, I think we had around 20 who came, took their day off work to grab the early ferry from Fall River and Barnstable to come to Nantucket, along with the Nantucket firefighters, to do this study. And they were really invested. They had a lot of ownership of what we were doing. It was really helpful for me to be able to go to the firehouse, to meet with them, and to talk with them to better understand exposure pathways from turnout gear. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jamie.
Great. Thank you so much, Courtney. Hi, everybody. I'm Jamie Hunkawa, co-founder of the Nantucket PFAS Action Group. I'm excited to share more about the education aspect of our TURI community grant. There's a significant communication gap between the PFAS research and science world and the world of the firefighting community and the general public. And we've seen that an overwhelming majority of firefighters still don't know about their on-the-job PFAS exposures, and many don't know what PFAS are. Next slide, Courtney. Our grant had two major components. The first, as you heard, is to learn more about firefighter PFAS exposures from turnout gear and to see if low PFAS gear is in fact a safer, less toxic alternative. Next slide. And the second component of our grant is to provide educational resources to the fire service with these fact sheets and through a website, pfasfreeppe.com, where we've aggregated information about the grant project, independent PFAS research, news, and more. It's a great resource for those looking to learn more about PFAS and firefighter gear. Next slide. In addition to educating firefighters, we also saw that educating the press was a really impactful tool to help disseminate information. Next slide. Aisha and I were fortunate enough to recently attend the 3rd National PFAS Conference that Courtney pulled together. It was amazing, where we presented a poster on our TURI project. At the conference, we also attended a workshop that was hosted by NIOSH and the IAFF, which was titled Next Steps to Address PFAS in the Fire Service, a discussion of experience, resources, and priorities to reduce PFAS exposure in firefighters. Right up our alley. And the feedback was that there is an expansive educational need gap. Firefighters want easy to digest fact sheets, end user education, and resources like websites and best practices. This was incredibly validating, and we're excited to start disseminating our educational materials to our network and communications partners. Next slide. Ultimately, the Nantucket Fire Department is an amazing case study on how connecting with departments, including firefighters in the conversation, and sharing resources, education, and information from a trusted source can change departments' behavior. Our TURI grant afforded us the opportunity to connect and work with the Nantucket Fire Department, and since then, they've adopted safe handling practices, only wear their gear on fire-related calls, and understand the importance of reducing their PFAS exposures with safer alternatives. Our firefighters deserve safe PPE, and we're so grateful that our TURI grant can help firefighters get one step closer to reducing occupational PFAS exposures. Thank you so much, and I'll now turn it over to firefighter Jason Burns from Fall River for some final words. I wasn't sure if he joined, but is he on?
Just get on.
Oh my gosh, amazing timing. Great.
Thank you very much. So I don't know what I missed here, but I just want to thank everybody involved. So from my perspective, I'll give you the brief history. Cancer is devastating the fire service. Studies have shown that since 2003 that 66–70% of our occupational deaths, our line of duty deaths, come from cancer. And the whole PFAS issue really came to light in 2017. And that was on the heels of me burying, a 37-year-old friend and Fall River firefighter. And then 2 years later, burying a 32-year-old kid, with brain cancer. And really kind of seeking out information, like how do I deal with this? How do I protect the rest of my membership? And so that has, to make the story a little short, we've connected with, the Nantucket PFAS group, and this TURI grant has really led to an unbelievable partnership. And I kind of try to say to people, I'm just a kid who's a firefighter, right? And I'm trying to figure out this problem. I want to protect my firefighters from these exposures. I want to limit their exposure, and to be able to have access to the really bright people who are probably on this this video here, and with this grant, I think the thing that stuck out to me the most was how how engaged we were allowed to be in the process, how I was able to connect and kind of say like, hey, I think this is what we do. This is how I think it impacts my community. This is what happens on a daily basis. And I want to tell you from my perspective, that doesn't happen. Like, we usually get really bright people come in and tell me, facts and data and, hey, you go deal with it. And, I did catch Jamie's, speech, and we have a gap in information. Firefighters, we have, 1.2 million firefighters in the United States. We got probably another 200,000 in Canada. And there are firefighters right now who don't know about this. So there's a significant gap. And my focus right now is, while it's in the gear, obviously my focus, the big picture is get it out. Let's ban it. This is bad stuff. Everybody here, I'm singing to the choir. Everybody knows how bad it is. However, in the meantime, while it's required to be in my gear, we really got to educate firefighters that it's not only there, but while it's there, how do you handle your gear? How do you lessen your exposure? How do you, maintain safety? How do you protect your family? I mean, there was a stat I recently read that firefighter children are 200 times more likely to get, pediatric cancer. These numbers are horrifying. So the work that was done here is to me monumental. The involvement from firefighters, I think, it's uncharted. We don't get that access. We don't get that process. So I'm appreciative, to TURI. I'm appreciative for the funding for this grant process. The education piece is going to happen, and we are going to make it better. But this, to me, was an unbelievable shift in how things get operated. So I have to say thank you. I have to, shower praise on everybody that I worked with. It's access that firefighters don't get, and to be able to have a say in that, it's humbling, and I'm grateful. So thank you for what you did. Thank you for putting aside these funds and trying to help firefighters. We need it. We desperately need it. And so thank you.
Thank you so much, Jason. And thank you, Aisha, Jamie, and Courtney. Your work together has just been so wonderful. And thank you all so much for making the time to be here today and for everything that you're doing. Representative Fernandez, are you?
Hi, yeah, I'm here. I'll be brief, but that was a really moving presentation, and just shows the incredible work being done on Nantucket. Just want to thank TURI and the chairs of the NREC committee for putting this on. These are such critical issues impacting people throughout our communities, and we need to be doing everything we can to reduce these forever chemicals from our environment. And so just want to, say how proud we are from the state of Aisha and Jamie and Courtney's work, and just really being a hub on island for education on these issues, and spearheading, really groundbreaking work and trying to reduce these chemicals for firefighters who put their lives on the line to keep our community safe every day. And, I think quite the very least we can do is make sure that the gear that they are using is not harming them. I think we're doing a lot more, but let's start with that, right? And so, we have legislation pending and moving in the House and on the Senate on this. We have a lot more work to do, but just really grateful to the team on Nantucket for their work. And Nantucket continues to be a leader in reducing chemicals and fertilizer and all types of toxins that impact the environment. So we do have, and we're sending them to you guys next time we're on island, State House, official State House citations. Oh, there it is. For you guys. So we'll see you on Nantucket soon, and looking forward to dropping these off in person. So be well, and thank you all for your good work.
Thank you so much, Representative Fernandez. And Jeffrey Suarez, are you also?
House side to measure it.
Yep, I'm here as well. Apologies, there might be some background noise, multiple Zoom meetings in the office today. But Aisha and Jamie and Jason and Nate and Sean, thank you so much for the work that you've done. I'm from Senator Sear's office, everybody. Senator Sear was obviously co-chair with Rep. Hogan of the PFAS Interagency Task Force. The Nantucket PFAS Action Group was just instrumental in helping us throughout the course of the entire task force and throughout hearings, and your testimony and your insight and your anecdotes and your stories were just so influential to the work that we did. And we were proud to be able to get some funding through the most recent budget for an AFFF take back program. And that was very, that was a direct result of the close work that you did with us and advocating for those kind of programs again. So we thank you for that. And on behalf of Senator Sear, just, we're very grateful. And when we come up to next session, when we're looking at new legislation to, incorporate all of these recommendations from the task force into some type of bill or legislation, we look forward to continuing to work with you. So thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jeff. So now we will move on to the next project, which is the Silent Spring Institute and Resilient Sisterhood project. And I'm going to share my screen again in just one moment. Okay, Alicia.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be presenting to you all about our work with educating Black women about toxic chemicals that are in consumer products. And I'm just gonna hop right in. So next slide. So our work in particular focused on Black women because Black women suffer more from hormone-related health problems, including fibroids, infertility, and are diagnosed more with triple-negative breast cancer and have increasing rates of these cancers and endometrial cancer, and also have been found to have higher levels of certain personal care product chemicals in their bodies, and also use more personal care products of certain categories in different categories of products than women from other racial groups. Next slide. And we look at our work through the environmental injustice of beauty framework, which links intersectional systems of oppression to racialized beauty practices, which leads to unequal chemical exposures and thus adverse health outcomes. So for example, colorism may lead to the use of skin lightening, which exposes Black people to higher levels of chemicals that are associated with adverse health outcomes such as kidney damage. Next slide. So Silent Spring led the first study to test hair products used by Black women, and we tested about 18 products. And what we found was that 45 of the 66 chemicals that were targeted were found in the products. And each product had multiple of these endocrine disrupting chemicals in them. So anywhere between 4 and 30 chemicals were found in each product. Each one had, all of the products had fragrance chemicals. Some of the concentrations were higher in these products than products that are not directly marketed, than other products that are not directly marketed to Black women, which is consistent with an exposure disparity that was found. And also there were 7 chemicals that are regulated in California and banned in the European Union cosmetics that were found in these products. And also the highest level of the chemicals were found, highest levels of 5 of the chemicals were found at highest concentrations in hair products that are marketed to children. So next slide. So this project is a 2-year project, all funded and supported by TURI. And so for the first year of the project, we recruited Black women in Massachusetts to have a conversation with us where we spoke with them in a workshop style to learn more about their product use and things that they considered when selecting personal care products. And so after we had these workshops, we asked the women to log their product use. So over 3 days, we asked them to use this app, which allowed us to get information about the products that they were using and the frequency of use, and we inventoried it. When we followed up with them in workshops, we shared with them some of the summaries from the discussion that we had and some of the app information, and we discussed with them some recommendations to limit exposures to harmful chemicals in consumer products. Next slide. So during the workshops we did, or during this, for this part of the project, we did learn about the factors that contribute to product use for the participants. And so we can talk about those, but I'm not sure what happened here. But what we really found was what was influencing the use of certain of these personal care products. And what we found was that a lot of the women were looking to social media. So the different, different social media sites, or the feedback that people were putting online about products as a way of selecting their products. Next slide. So what we did was, for the second year of this project, and I'm gonna try to keep my camera from freezing. For the second year of the project, what we did was put together a team of social media influence. So we identified some social media content creators from a lot of niches, and we pitched about 30 of them. Of the 30 people that we pitched to be a part of the team, we onboarded about 10 social media influencers. And we can go to the next slide. We ended up with our production team. So they come from a wide range of different niches. So everywhere from beauty and health to pole fitness, empowerment, and sustainability. Next slide. So pretty much what we asked of the influencers were, hey, come out to this workshop, learn a little bit of information about the toxic chemicals in consumer products, and create some content and share with us what your audience had to say about it. And that was our, pretty much the method we use. So here is an example of a piece of content where this was made by Dr. Ijamakola, where she created a piece of content that was true to her voice and the aesthetic of the rest of her page, while presenting suggestions for reducing chemical exposure. She used a caption, which is not included here on this slide, but she really used it to connect with her audience. So she did share the science and the information, but she also talked about her personal struggle with fibroids and infertility. And this was one of the first analytics we had gotten back from one of our influencers, and it was just mind blowing. So here she was able to able to get over 25,000 views, and we were just like mind blown by the amount of people that were getting their eyes on this work. So we can go to the next slide, and this is a video. So are you sharing audio?
Okay, let's see if you can all hear this.
Ladies, when was the last time you read the label while out shopping for your hair, skin, and feminine hygiene products? Did you know there are endocrine disrupting chemicals in these everyday products? EDCs are chemicals that interfere with the body's hormones or endocrine system. And in fact, Black women suffer more from hormone-related health problems, including fibroids, infertility, and increasing rates of breast and endometrial cancers. Don't forget to check the label before you check out.
So this example is just another post that I feel was thought out and executed with our organizations in mind. So I really do feel that this is a post that like Silent Spring or RSP could post on their page and it wouldn't seem out of place. So I really thought it was interesting, the range of content that was created. And we can go to the next slide. So we had content that was, that was on different platforms. So TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, but also just like, as you can see in those two posts, those were two very different pieces of content, but still got the same point across. And so we were able to get some of audience feedback. So 146 people took participants took the survey. So these are the people who are following the influencers, and about 74% of them said that the posts increased their concern about how chemicals in products may affect their health. But what I really think is interesting is that although about 83% of the survey takers say that they heard about chemicals in products affecting their health, it was more than 40 of them that were not already, at least in part, avoiding chemicals a health concern, but say that they want to after seeing the post that they saw. The feedback too had been so encouraging and reinforcing to us that the work that we are doing is needed. In the comment sections too, were filled with people who felt related to and who wanted to learn more about how to be cautious when it comes to their health. The audience acknowledges that, yes, they do know this information, but seeing it by the content creator encourages that push to take action. So what I really want to emphasize here is that these are numbers that you just really won't see sharing this info through like a webinar format, or even if like Silent Spring was to post it on our Instagram page. It's the connection that the content creators have with their community that really allowed this work to do numbers that it's done. And that like we're very appreciative to TURI because they really got this project off the ground. So without the funding here, we wouldn't have been able to support either year of the work and support our influencers in pushing forth this work. So we're very grateful to TURI for the financial support.
Thank you so much, Alicia and the whole team. You've done just really amazing work and gotten the word out about toxic chemicals and safer alternatives to a wide range of people. So congratulations. Richard Powell, are you available?
I am. Hi, everybody. I'm Richard Powell. I'm Senator Cream's Chief of Staff. Senator Cream represents Newton, Brookline, and Wellesley, and she's the majority leader and a longtime supporter of Silent Springs Institute, as well as the Toxic Use Reduction Institute. And really great to see the work that's being done. And I have to say, I'm not a huge fan of social media, although Senator Cream has embraced it. But I think this project could convince me otherwise, that it really can have a positive impact. And we really appreciate the work that's being done, and especially in the community. And so we really thank you for your work, and it's really impressive. And hopefully it'll continue going forward, and those likes and shares will go up in numbers even more. So appreciate the work. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So next we're going to hear from Community Action Works and Clean Water Fund, and I will share my screen again.
Perfect. Thank you, Rachel. Great. So my name is Mary Cordero, and I'm a community organizer with Community Action Works. Completing this project with me is Laura Spark, a senior policy advocate from Clean Water Fund. As Massachusetts continues to conduct drinking water tests, an increasing number of Massachusetts residents are learning that PFAS are in their water at levels above the state maximum contaminant level of 20 parts per trillion. As residents become aware that their water, if we could stay at the first slide, as residents become aware that their water is contaminated, they are scared and eager to find out how to protect themselves and their families from these chemicals. And these newly realized concerns about local water contamination provide an opportunity to educate Massachusetts residents, not just about the specific steps needed to restore local water safety, but about the broader problem of PFAS contamination and the need to sharply reduce the use of this highly toxic class of chemicals. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we conducted outreach to engage community members, particularly those newly interested in PFAS due to concerning water test results, with a goal of educating at least 200 people across the state about how to reduce the use of and exposure to PFAS through workshops and dissemination of information online. And we have been able to provide Massachusetts residents with accurate information about PFAS chemicals, including health and environmental concerns, alternatives to PFAS, and practical steps that can be taken by individuals, businesses, communities, and governments to reduce this use. We have provided tools that enable residents to be more informed consumers of scientific information. We created fact sheets that explain how contaminants are measured in water and products, the role of different entities in assessing toxicity, and the language of toxicology and epidemiology as it relates to PFAS. Next slide, please. So through the 9 statewide and local workshops that we've done so far, and a couple more that are coming up, we have been able to educate over 200 people from more than 100 towns and cities across Massachusetts. And this here is our presentation for members of MassPIRG, Environment Massachusetts, and Community Action Works, where we had an attendance of more than 60 people. Next slide, please. So like I said, we led workshops in a variety of spaces with a variety of focuses. We held multiple statewide workshops, local presentations which addressed unique issues present in different communities like Holliston, Millis, Belmont, and the Tri-Town area of Holbrook, Randolph, and Braintree. We held most of these workshops virtually with a couple in person. Next slide, please. Through these statewide and local workshops, we provided community members with information about health and environmental concerns, safer alternatives, and practical steps to reduce the use of PFAS. And this was done through webinars, as you can see here on this slide. And then next slide, please. Also fact sheets. So we were able to leave the community members with information that they can refer back to and share. These fact sheets help people better understand the information and claims about PFAS, whether such information is provided by governments, water suppliers, businesses, advocacy groups, or the media. Next slide, please. So going back to our goals of engaging community members, educating Massachusetts residents, and providing the people with information, there were a few key impacts that this grant was able to provide. So yes, impacted residents left our workshops with knowledge and actionable and manageable steps that they can take to limit their and their family's exposure, but also they were heard. When residents first find out about their water contamination, many times their town or a consulting company will come out and talk at them with their legally obliged speech telling them that their water is contaminated with PFAS. Instead, we engaged with the residents and listened to their concerns and provided them with contacts, whether that was other concerned community members who are ready to take action or their local decision makers. And we made sure that they knew that they had power in this situation and next steps that they could take. And finally, we just want to thank the TURI Community Grant Program for allowing us to do this outreach and education work.
Thank you so much, Mary, for explaining your work and for everything that you've done. I just want to say, Mary and Laura, you really, in addition to presenting really excellent information on PFAS, you also went the extra mile to do a lot of additional research when you got questions from community members, and I know that was incredibly valuable to people. So thank you so much for your wonderful work. So we're going to go straight on to our last project. And so Lynn Rose, I will ask you to take the floor.
Okay, hi, thanks. So this project is a project that's actually goes back about 15 years. This is a project I did with Carol Westinghouse of Informed Green Solutions on safer cleaning and disinfecting in schools. Next slide, please. So this work actually started with a 5-year conference call with like EPA Antimicrobial Division, the CDC, the Mass Department of Public Health, and Labor Standards. And it was all to problem solve the issue of use of disinfectants in schools. And so when the pandemic, so that resulted in a book in 2010, a handbook designed to provide guidance on schools developing their own program. And when that was also TURI funded. And when the pandemic hit, it was time, it'd been a decade. We looked to revise and update this to address the pandemic. Next slide, please. And the reason that this all started and where we were going with this now is that the chemicals that are used for infection control can pose exposures to vulnerable population, whether it's the children in schools, pregnant women, or the workers that are using the products. So it can, the conventional products can cause occupational asthma. And whether it's for the workers or the occupants, it can disrupt hormonal processes resulting in cancer and fertility issues, depending on what level of exposure. Next, please. And so when the pandemic hit, there was so much uncertainty about, was it contact transmission? And at the beginning, we thought it was contact transmission, and the regulatory community at the federal level was providing information, which changed as we learned about the pandemic. And we were changing protocols as fast as they were changing information. But even with all the work that was being done at the federal level, there was this flood of products and advice coming from vendors that were newly on the market or with new technologies on the market. And even though EPA had expedited a number of their processes to try and review this and help those of us at the operational level to figure out what we could do safely and what was effective, EPA could not keep up with that. And so what we found, I work with the Mass Facilities Administrators Association, is that our folks rely really heavily on vendors. And what we were finding with vendors was vendors did not understand the regulations. They did not really understand. They were making claims about products they really didn't know. There was a lot of new vendors on the market, kind of taking advantage of the fear factor in the new market. Next, please. And as a result, I mean, what we were seeing, you know, I don't know how familiar people are, but there was a backup of getting supplies. Everybody wanted hand sanitizer and disinfectant. And then there was like, people were terrified they were not going to be prepared for reentry, for people coming back into the workplace. And so what I personally saw was people spending thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars on products and disinfecting equipment that we were not really clear how safe it was, how effective it was going to be against the virus. And as a result, some of what we saw was just pallets and pallets of flammable chemicals with all the, you know, we had social distancing, so chemicals were stored really unsafely. People were not aware of what the hazards were. The other thing is now on the back end of the pandemic, I have personally disposed of as hazardous waste thousands and thousands of dollars of products that people bought that they didn't need. Next slide, please. And because of all this rampant misinformation, what we found was a lot of unnecessary exposures. We had companies coming in and spraying walls and floors and all kinds of unneeded use of chemicals that were not effective in dealing with the virus, but were really born out of fear and preying on people's fear. And so it caused unnecessary exposures. It left residues. It exposed the people using it. And we incurred like enormous amount of cost from service providers and from buying the products because of not having a really solid understanding of the pandemic and what we really needed to do. Next slide, please. Oops, sorry, just hit the button one more time. Sorry, and the animation. The other thing that was really concerning was there was a lot of new equipment on the market that people were not familiar with. And again, the EPA had not kept up with the regulatory review of a lot of these things coming on the market. So there were not only exposure issues, but there were some really serious safety issues using this equipment. And you never, ever found a vendor. I have never found a vendor providing this information. And this is where TURI really gave us a platform to pull this information up and get it out. Next slide, please. So the way that we address these issues is we updated the handbook, but through the handbook, we were able to provide fact sheets and guidance documents, how you select safer products, how you use them safely, how you communicate, assigning roles and responsibilities. And so this was the handbook itself. Next slide, please. And we also did, I mean, I personally trained probably 4,000 or 5,000 people over the last 2.5 years since the pandemic started. A lot of it was reentry. We worked with the Mass Interlocal Insurance Association, who insures cities and towns and schools. We worked with Mass Facilities. We worked with the Operational Services Division Environmental Preferable Products Program to work with vendors, because we really had to educate the vendors on what was okay and what they needed to work with their buyers on because of all the rampant misinformation. So we worked really closely with them to reach out to the vendors and the buyers. We work with school districts. And it was really instrumental in getting information to those who actually buy and use the products. Next slide, please. So wrapping it all up, you know, as you're talking about what kind of difference did our project make, what kind of impact, I have to say, working with facility managers, working with buyers, working with purchasers, they don't have the expertise and they don't have the funding to get this information, and people needed information right away. And we had access through TURI to the lab. We worked really closely over the last 15, probably 17 years with TURI to really research this information and put it together in a way that we could get it out to people. So we did webinars. We wanted people to understand regulatory, what was okay, what was safe, separate fact from fiction with all the rampant misinformation, and help people make safer product choices. And the bottom line during the pandemic was safer infection or safe infection control. So I have to say, as a layperson working with TURI and having both support and access to expertise, and we could get that information out, was invaluable. People just didn't have time and didn't have the skills. So I just really want to thank you for that. So the project over the last probably 15 or 17 years has really evolved with that support. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you so much to all of you. I'll stop sharing my screen. So we've made it to the end of the presentations before running out of time, which I'm happy about. So if there's a little bit more discussion or anybody would like to jump in with some additional congratulations or comments, thank you again so much to all of the community champions. You've done really incredible work, and thank you so much for taking the time to explain it today. And you know, because the time was short, we wanted to get it within a single hour. We didn't have the entire full set of congratulations that we might have fit in if we had even more time. But yeah, I think I'll just open it up. If anybody would just like to just go ahead and, I think if you'd like to say something, just go ahead and unmute yourself and jump in with a comment or a question.
I guess I just want to say, please keep the Joint Committee apprised, because this has been fascinating, wonderful, educational, reaffirming, and also a call to action. So keep us posted on what the legislature can do to be partners with all of you. And thank you for all of your work. Really love it. Loved listening.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thanks for all of your support and all of your work.
Well, this is Liz Harriman. I'm the Deputy Director at TURI. I'm just going to pop in and say thank you so much to all the grantees. You did a tremendous job this year, and we certainly appreciate the heart, soul, and expertise that you brought to all your projects. It makes all the difference, and thank you very much. And I can see that there's a lot of continuing work that will still happen.
Okay, well, if there aren't any other questions or comments, then I'll just say thank you again to Chair Dom for hosting us. Really appreciate it. Yeah, it's been great to be here with all of you. Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.